Hey guys, so we are going to finish our notes on imperialism today. Monday we talked about imperialism in Africa. Today we're going to talk about imperialism in Asia. So I'm going to go over the notes with y'all really quickly and then you can work on your guided notes. Alrighty. Kiki. Sorry guys, my cat is in my lap right now because she's very needy. Like we said on Monday, imperialism is when you try and take over another country to use their raw materials. So you make them like your own colony. So we're going to talk about that happening in Asia. All right. So China. We've talked about China before. China was an isolationist country that had limited trade with European countries. So that means that it didn't really interact with other countries. It was cut off from a lot of places, and because of that, it developed its own unique culture. Now, the British were finally able to figure out what they could trade with the Chinese, because the Chinese, for the most part, had everything they needed. Well, the British figured out that the Chinese wanted opium, the drug opium. And so they started trading this with the Chinese, and the Chinese people became addicted to opium. So the Chinese government obviously wants to stop this. They don't want their people addicted to opium. And this leads to the Opium Wars. So there are two different wars in 1839 and 1856, and the wars were over opium. The Chinese wanted Britain to stop trading opium to the Chinese people. So even though the Chinese had outlawed it, the British were still finding ways around it and sneaking it into the country. Well, the Chinese lost both of the wars. Their ships were no match for the British Navy. They didn't have, their weapons weren't as advanced as the British. So China lost both wars. And as a result, Britain receives money and land from China. And the land they received is Hong Kong. So actually up until, I think it was 1997, Hong Kong was a British colony. The British were in charge of it. And that was all from the Opium Wars. And another stipulation, or another result of the Opium Wars, was that China had to allow other countries to trade with them. They couldn't remain isolationist anymore. China is not happy. Now, these other countries that wanted to trade with China, they set up spheres of influence. And a sphere of influence is an area in which a foreign country controls trade and investment in another country. So that means these other countries actually control parts of China where they trade. So if you look at this map right here, you can see what's in green is controlled by the British. What's in this like yellow orangish color right here is controlled by the French. What's in this like pinkish color is controlled by Russia. What's in this purple color over here is controlled by Japan. So those are their spheres of influence. That is the area that they actually control. Or they control trade in that area. Now, the U.S. did not have a sphere of influence. They did not have a sphere of influence in China, and they wanted to change this. So they proposed the open door policy, which said China's doors will be open to all nations, even if you don't have a sphere of influence in China, even if you don't have control over a part of China, you can still trade with China. And this became the new policy. Now, China obviously does not like all of this stuff going on. They don't want these other people coming into their country, taking over. They don't want to be forced to trade with these other nations. And so they start the Boxer Rebellion in 1899. And, yes, Kiki, I see. Thank you. All right. So the Boxer Rebellion was started because China was tired of all these countries coming in. They were tired of Europeans coming in and trying to spread Christianity. They wanted them out. And so the Society of the Harmonious Fists, they're also called the Boxers, they started attacking foreigners and Christian Chinese people. And this is why it was called the Boxer Rebellion. Now, just like with the Opium Wars, China lost. Britain, France, Germany, Russia, Japan, and the U.S. all sent troops to stop the rebellion. The rebellion was not successful. Once again, the Chinese just didn't have advanced weaponry. They were no match for all those other nations. So the Chinese did lose. Now, if you look at the pictures here, you can see the soldiers fighting with the Chinese right here. But if you look at this picture, you can see how violent this was. So this is where the Chinese are attacking the Christian people and the Europeans who are trying to spread Christianity. They've got heads on stakes. This, I think he's like cutting out part of his face. I'm not sure. But it was very, very violent. So after this, China, they don't really accept their fate, but there's not really much they can do. So that's China. We're going to move on to Japan very quickly, and then we will be done. So Japan was also an isolationist country, just like China. It is literally right next to China. It's a series of islands. The difference with Japan is that when other countries wanted to trade with Japan, Japan let them. So the U.S. forced Japan to sign a treaty saying they would open up for trade with other countries or else the U.S. would attack them. Now, Japan was worried that what happened with China would happen with them, that all these other countries would come in, they would start taking over, they would try to change all this stuff. So Japan decides to give in. They don't want what happened to China to happen with them, so they sign the treaty. They say, all right, we will trade with other nations. And as they were trading with other nations, all these ideas from the Industrial Revolution start coming into Japan, and Japan starts to industrialize, and it becomes a more modern nation. So whereas China tries to kind of stay in the past, Japan starts moving towards the future. All right, so we are going to stop right there. We are done with imperialism, and imperialism is one of the causes that's going to lead into World War I that we're going to be talking about next week. All right, guys, see you later.